Singh in Bhopal, Bureau Report, India Today.
So that's the vaccine situation. But the larger challenge facing India and the world remains that of the Delta variant. Will it mutate in some new form? It's already wreaked havoc in India during the second wave. Now it has the rest of the world on tenterhooks. Many countries like Australia are once again going into lockdown mode, as has neighboring Bangladesh. 85 countries now reporting some kind of Delta variant hitting them. Take a look.
%70 of Australia back under lockdown. Strict curbs like never seen before. The Delta variant of coronavirus is triggering outbreaks in almost every nook and corner of the island continent. Sydney, one of the worst hit cities, was the first to shut down. In Queensland, masks are back. Home gatherings are limited in several areas, including state capital Brisbane. The COVID-19 Response Committee has called for utmost caution. England, that was all set to reopen, had to halt plans for weeks after a spike in cases due to the Delta variant. Thousands of anti-lockdown protesters marched through the central London on Sunday. The Prime Minister's 10 Downing Street residence and Parliament were both pelted with tennis balls. In Russia, the threat of the Delta virus is amplified. Only 14% of Russia's population have received first dose of the vaccine. Moscow and St. Petersburg reported record spikes in daily COVID deaths. COVID cases have been exploding in the last few weeks, thanks to, among other things, Euro 2020. St. Petersburg has hosted 6 Euro matches and is scheduled to host a quarter-finals match later this week. A strict 2-week lockdown is in place in South Africa, following a massive resurgence of infections caused by the Delta mutant. Close to our borders, Bangladesh is fighting a new outbreak with thousands stranded after a new sweeping lockdown. Even as the infectious Delta variant spooks the world, forcing lockdowns, India continues to unlock after recovering from the monster second wave triggered by the mutant that was first detected in the country. Bureau Report, India Today.
To get a perspective, I'm joined by a very special guest, Professor Tim Spector, epidemiologist who's been tracking the COVID vaccine now for months from King's College London, joins me. Appreciate your joining us. The big question I want to ask you, Professor Spector, the World Health Organization now saying that the Delta variant is spread or has spread in at least 85 countries. What began in India has now spread across the world. Would I be right in saying that the variant continues to pose the single biggest global challenge since the COVID-19 virus broke out?
Yes, currently it's an evolving virus, so I expect we're going to see more variations of the Delta as the year goes on. But certainly it's the biggest current problem because of its increased transmissibility, so that a lot of the previous measures haven't been good enough to protect us against this new variant, and the vaccines, although they're working, aren't quite as effective as they were, particularly if you've just had one jab. So I think it's every country now needs to look at their plans and I think rethink how they are going to deal with this problem when the Delta variant has taken over, which I'm pretty sure it will in most countries.
You know, what you're saying will be seen as worrying for many, because in India, we're already seeing Delta having mutated into a potential new variant, Delta Plus. Do you believe, therefore, that the variant will now continue to further mutate, and it is almost inevitable that, therefore, we will see more waves in India and across the world over the next few months?
I think there will be more waves, but I think we have to understand also that it's not just about the number of cases. Generally, viruses mutate so that they become more transmissible, more infectious, but they get maybe hopefully less severe. And so they may cause less people to go to hospital and less people to die. And that's That's, I think, the hope that all of us have. And in the UK at the moment, this is sort of what we're seeing, not necessarily because of the variant being kind to us, but because we have a mixture of either young people, most people getting it are very young people under 30, and as probably happened in India as well. And the other people, so 3/4 of the people who are getting it are young, and the quarter that get it who are older have generally been vaccinated. And so those people are getting a much milder disease with symptoms that are more like a bad cold than the classic COVID with shortness of breath and leading people to go to hospital. So I think we're seeing a changing phase of the virus. This is certainly what our Zoe app is showing, which has 4 million users in the UK, which is giving us these updates on symptoms. And the new symptoms are really quite different. They're not the classical ones at all. They're not the fever, the cough, the shortness of breath. They're much more cold-like symptoms and sore throats. So people may not know they're infected, and that's possibly why they're spreading it.
But what, of course, in the Indian context, again, Professor Spector, is that we are seeing the first cases of Delta Plus in India, over 50 cases detected. Now, there are some scientists here, Professor Spector, who are suggesting that Delta Plus has a greater affinity to stick to lung cells, could cause more damage in the long run. Would it be premature at this stage to call Delta Plus more infections, and could it trigger, as some fear, a third wave?
I think it's always a bit premature to until we've got much more data on this. And I think we can expect all these new variants to be better than the previous ones at sticking to us, sticking in our lungs, and you can transmit it with smaller amounts of virus. That seems clear. I think it's much harder to work out whether it's really more likely to be lethal or severe, because, as I said, in general, most the viruses, as they evolve, they get milder, because the virus doesn't want to kill you either. It wants to just stay for a few days and then pass to someone else. That's what viruses do best. And so hopefully it might stick in your mucus more, but it's not likely to kill you. So let's see what happens. But I think it's important we realize that this pandemic is changing, and we need to change our country's plans and lists of symptoms and how to recognize it as fast as the virus is changing. And I think that's really important.
I think you're making an important observation, which perhaps we'll take note of in the days ahead, that the virus in its new form will perhaps have milder symptoms, is what you seem to be suggesting. I also saw a recent tweet of yours, Professor Spector, which is interesting in the context of children, because you said that COVID is endemic and most susceptible people are now protected. It makes no sense to keep sending masses of children home and mess up their education when one case occurs and the risk is tiny. Now, this comes at a time, Professor, when many suggest a future wave could infect children. They will be susceptible. Do you want to clarify, are children susceptible or not?
Yeah, I think most children who get COVID are asymptomatic, and they don't get any symptoms. They're less likely to get any long-term problems. So for them, it's like a very mild cold if they get it at all. And so the only real risk of it running riot in children is really that they will infect their teachers or their older relatives who might be susceptible. But if you've vaccinated, say, potentially sick teachers, or you have, the parents and grandparents who have been vaccinated or are separated, then I think, in my view, carrying on education, it should be a priority, because in many countries like the UK, children in the last year and a half have lost a lot of time, and particularly from deprived households. So economically, long term, that's going to have a much bigger effect. And also, I think we have to, at some point, realize we're not going to get zero COVID. We're going to have years of having these low levels of infection. So we need to change our laws and our rules to make our society still function, so we can economically get back to where we were, so we can get our hospitals open again for all those other diseases that people aren't coming forward. You know, many more people are dying of cancer, heart disease, because they're worried about going to hospitals or getting out of their homes. So I think we have to start this discussion about the broader aspects. And I think children's a good example now where we should be much more relaxed about children as long as other people are protected.
You know, all of this, though, Professor Spector, then comes down to a key question. When you look at policy, how do you're saying that we cannot conceive of a world where there will be zero COVID. That then boils down to the key question, when do we unlock? Britain, where you are, has delayed its unlocking by about a month. Across the world, on the other hand, you've got countries like Australia relocking now. Is there an ideal time? Do you see a sweet spot when a country or a city should be unlocking? Is there any clarity now on that issue?
I think each country's got to make its mind up about the balance between its health service and its economy, and you know, the mentality of the people. And I think maybe the idea that there's one position in time where everything is back to normal, I don't think is really reality. And the UK is talking about, ending lockdown and that's it, because as a big political sort of gesture. But it doesn't make sense to then, just after that, have that, the Euro football finals with 60,000 people in a stadium where you're going to generate lots of new cases. I think you can still be sensible, get 95% of the country working fully again, and just keep a few sensible restrictions just to limit these mass outbreaks that could cause local problems to the health service. But each country's got to weigh up how it can deal with the health service sides of it. If it can deal with those, then it should open up. I think that should be the criteria, and every country's got to make its own mind up about how we do that.
The other challenge, both for India and across the world, remains vaccination. We are seeing some countries vaccinating much faster than others. There is also a debate in that context, Professor Spector, as to which vaccine is the most effective against Delta plus and against Delta and, dare I say, Delta plus. You say vaccines are working, they limit hospitalization. Are you talking only about AstraZeneca or Covishield as it's called here? Are you talking of the mRNA vaccines like Pfizer? Do you see among the existing pool of vaccines, some vaccines far more effective than others, or are the distinctions very minor?
In the UK, and where we get our data from the Zoe app from, where we have over 1 million people have logged their vaccines, we have about half on Pfizer and slightly more on AstraZeneca and a few on Moderna. So that's really all we have to go on. And in general, the patterns are broadly similar for both the vaccines. But if you look at its response against the Delta variant, we see a slight advantage to the Pfizer one compared to the AstraZeneca. And that might just be because we're also including response after just one jab. So after one jab, the Pfizer does better. There's not as much difference when you get after 2 jabs.
Interesting. After 1 jab, Pfizer does better. 2 jabs, you're saying there isn't much distinction. Now, this also, Professor Spector, comes at a time when there's a lot of talk about using a cocktail of vaccines, mixing vaccines and potentially using them as a booster dose in a few months from now. Is that also inevitable now?
Yeah, I think we're seeing, I'm seeing my medical colleagues who've been finished vaccinated back in March, getting reinfected again. And I think they will now be given boosters with, perhaps the other alternate vaccines to increase the breadth of their immunity. So I think we're going to start seeing boosters again at the end of the year. And I expect these will be mix and match type ones to try and combat these new variants, to get as wide a difference in our immune responses, because the 2 vaccines do work differently. So hopefully, if you get both of them, then you'll get maximum protection. And there's some studies going on at the moment that are looking into that. We don't have the results, but in theory, it should work like that. So I'm expecting, I was vaccinated back in February. I should be getting a booster, as other doctors are, before the end of the year, because we know that, after about 6 months, our immunity does start to wane again. So this is a long, ongoing battle. This isn't something we can just say it's going to be over in a few months.
So a booster dose, from what you suggest, is almost certain. Something I read, something that you wrote that I read recently, you wrote about diet. You've done a book on it, I know. Do you believe that there is an ideal diet, doctor, to be followed to build resilience against COVID-19? Is there an ideal diet out there?
I do. And 1 million people on the Zoe app filled in a nutrition survey. And we found that what you ate, not the amount, but the quality of the food you ate, had a big impact on your response to COVID. So people who had the highest quality food, as scored independently in terms of lots of diversity of plants and low levels of processed foods and snacks and sugars, those people on high quality diets had 20% less severe COVID. And I think that explains a lot of these effects we're seeing, particularly in the US and the UK, where socially deprived groups, even when you adjust for obesity, are dying and getting more severe infections. So it's another really important story linking the importance of nutrition and gut health, which is my passion. That's what I study. Can have a really big effect on our immune systems through our gut microbes, and this is absolutely crucial for us moving forward. And I think it's a really important lesson that the quality of a population's diet is going to be crucial for their general health.
Anything specific, though, Professor Spector, that you recommend that you must have in your diet in this fight against COVID?
Well, you have to read my books, The Diet Myth, to get the full list. But basically, I want people to have 30 different plants a week. And if you do that, and that includes nuts and seeds, but, the traditional Indian diet, for example, with lots of legumes and lentils and beans, is really, really good. And you add in things like fermented milk, your kefirs, your yogurts, all these kinds of foods in a broad plant-based way, and you avoid snacks, biscuits, high sugar foods. They're the best ones for your gut microbes. They're the best ones that will protect your immune system going forward.
High sugar foods, I should avoid that. But Professor, despite all the mutations and variants, would you say we are going to be in a better place by the end of the year? The world and India will be in a better place, given the vaccination pace in particular?
I think the virus is going to keep changing, but I'm hopeful that our vaccine program globally is going to be winning against the virus. So we'll be seeing less deaths, less severe infections, and it's going to be moving towards like a flu-like illness or a really bad cold. And I hope we'll just have to start learning to live with this as we have with other flu epidemics, and hopefully we'll calm down. But there's a lot of work ahead and a lot of unknowns ahead of us. But that's my hope, that we'll be in a better place.
We will be in a better place. Good optimistic note to end on, Professor Spector. Thanks very much for sharing your wisdom. Lots to gain from your interview.